Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a review video for 1/35th scale aftermarket tracks. Something rather interesting happened to both of these models that I recently completed. This model here is a 1/35th scale M7 Priest, and this model here is a 1/35th scale M47 Patton. Both vehicles were built mostly out of the box, and both utilize the kit supplied vinyl tracks. After the vehicles were photographed and had videos posted on YouTube, they were placed in my collection with my other smaller scale builds. Several weeks passed, and one day I noticed that the tracks began to disintegrate on both the M7 as well as the M47. Here we have the broken vinyl track from the Patton, and here I have the broken track from the Priest. What's interesting is that both vehicles were recently completed, both were stowed in the same general location, and both were painted with the same types of paints. Now, unfortunately, the tracks getting brittle and snapping is nothing that is uncommon with vinyl track links, and it's actually one of the downside to one-piece vinyl track. However, it is somewhat rare and does happen once in a blue moon. However, for both of these builds to have this happen to them in a short proximity of time of being completed was rather interesting. Normally, these tracks tend to disintegrate with a multitude of three reasons. First would be just a bad batch of rubber that the pieces are made of. Another factor is environmental conditions, and another factor is that of the actual paint which was used to paint the pieces. I doubt that the material is to blame, as even though both of these models were made by Italeri, they were both made at different times. This model here dates back to the 1970s, while this model here was a re-release in 2001-2002. I also doubt if it was environmental conditions, as the models were stowed in climate-controlled locations that were not in direct sunlight for the ultraviolet radiation to degrade the tracks. Personally, I think what caused the issue was the type of paints that were used on the components. Both of the tracks were painted with the same can of Walmart Color Place rattle can spray paint. This spray paint here I've used for several decades, and I have builds that are aging up to 15 to 18 years old, and their tracks are perfectly fine. What I believe what happened was that whoever is producing the paints possibly changed the formula of the spray paint to a different type of chemical that may have a chemical reaction with the vinyl tracks of the Italeri model. Now, fortunately, with these two tanks here, finding replacement tracks is not very difficult. One viable way is to contact the company direct. With your instruction sheet, you could tell them which kit number and which part number needs to be replaced. In many cases with Italeri, as well as also Tamiya, they will send you replacement tracks, the same type that were originally on the tank. For these builds here, I went ahead and used a different source. For the M7 Priest, I went ahead and utilized the AFV Club T49 rubber tracks. And for the M47, I utilized the metal workable track links from friulmodel. We'll be going over the pros and cons of these track types in this video. First, a quick walk around the M7 Priest with the new tracks. and the M47 with its new tracks. Starting with the M7 Priest, the AFV Club T49 tracks are just like the kit originals in that they are a single length of flexible track. The advantage about using this system is that they are very easy and very quickly assembled and painted and installed to the vehicle. One difference, though, between the AFV Club track and the kit original track is the material. The kit original tracks are a stiffer vinyl type material, while the AFV Club track are a lot more flexible. One advantage about the flexible material is that it conforms better with the model suspension. One common trait of these Italeri Shermans that I discussed in the showcase video is that due to the stiffness of the track, it will want to make the form-fitting suspension have a certain bend to it on either end of the suspension. With the more flexible material, the track is a lot flatter and the suspension rides a lot better compared to the kit original. Also, if you're building your model for a diorama, it can better articulate with the terrain compared to the stock Italeri track. Another advantage about the AFV Club track is that it contours the Italeri sprocket perfectly. As you can see, the timing of the track and the pitch of the sprocket mesh perfectly with no riding over or any gaps that are visible. This is important as when you're picking aftermarket track for a model kit, depending on the manufacturer of the kit, sometimes tracks will not fit properly with the sprocket. This is one area that can really hurt the look of the model, as it's a very crucial point. As you can see, that is not an issue with the Italeri kit paired with the AFV Club track. Another advantage about the track is that its price and availability. These tracks came out in the late 1990s and early 2000s, so they've been on the market for a long period of time. They are also easily found on the internet as well as on eBay. A quick Google search should yield some good results. As for pricing, they are quite affordable, from prices range from about $5 to $10. Being one-piece vinyl, they are extremely easy to put together. You simply paint them, attach the two corners, and install to the vehicle. One drawback that the tracks do have is that if you are trying to model your vehicle in a diorama with it being either disabled or knocked out, or if you're going to have the crew working on replacing the track, the vinyl tracks are really not the option to go, as the vinyl doesn't contour and flex as a real track does with individual links. For something like that, your best bet is to go with a workable individual track link. However, for the application that you see here, which is that of a simple built model, the AFV Club track is definitely recommended. As for the paint, to avoid any chemical reactions, I went ahead and painted the track with Tamiya acrylic NATO black. The paint was airbrushed on to the track segments and then left dry. The acrylic paint, in my experience, doesn't interfere or have any reactions with the base material. As for the weathering, that's simply dry brushed on in my usual format. After the tracks were painted, they were assembled and simply installed. The whole operation took approximately 10 minutes. Moving on to the M47, unlike the Sherman, in which there are a lot of different options available in both vinyl as well as individual workable link, for the Patton series, there are currently only 3 options available: friulmodel, AFV Club, and Bronco. All 3 of these manufacturers produce individual workable track. As of the date of this video, there are no aftermarket sources for vinyl tracks for the Patton and Pershing-based vehicles. Both the Bronco and the AFV Club tracks are made out of plastic, while again, the Friulis are made out of casted metal. All three of which have nice thread patterning, as well as nice finely crisp details on the other components. Both the Bronco and AFV Club tracks require a little bit more fitting in order to get the pieces assembled, as they do contain more parts than the Friuli links. The Friuli link in comparison is one solid casted link with both end connectors and tooth pre-molded in. The Bronco track, from what I've seen on the internet, comprises out of several pieces of plastic that need to be deburred, and then the pads and the teeth kind of clamshell around the integrally molded in track pins. Just by looking at these pieces, I could tell you off the bat that they are going to require a lot of patience and a lot of time in order to get them assembled. Also, the burring, from my personal experience, the burring tiny little molded in rods that are found on the Bronco track are very problematic and never really come out all that good, as they're very fragile, very frail, and break very easily. Also, with the way the tracks are designed, accidentally gluing the tracks together appears to be something that could easily be done, which will negate the workable feature of the tracks that you're trying to go for. The other option is to utilize the plastic track from AFV Club. Now, if you go ahead and go on a modeling forum and ask about AFV Club tracks, or if you do some Google searching about these tracks, you will receive a lot of negative reviews of these tracks. However, the tracks are not impossible to assemble and can assemble into a decent set. I've assembled several in the past. In fact, sitting right next to the Patton is my M26 A1 Pershing from Dragon, in which this vehicle features workable tracks from AFV Club. The AFV Club tracks are made out of plastic. There is a rumor out there that they're resin, which is not true. They come on this plastic runner, and you have here the link with the two pads molded in, the teeth, as well as end connectors. This version here is from a HVSS Sherman. However, the Pershing tracks are identical, with the difference only being that of the center tooth. They assemble and do have the same potential problems as the Sherman tracks. The problem arises with the material that the tracks are made of. The plastic is very finely molded, but is also very, very frail and fragile, and can easily snap. Namely, right here, you have the two little pins for the end connectors, as well as the two center pins for the teeth. This, combined with the very tight tolerances of the tooth, can cause the tracks to break and crumble in your hand, which is obviously less than ideal. The set does have a set of instructions printed on the back, and if you follow these instructions, you will lead to a disaster, as following these instructions will lead you to break the track links as they have it represented here. The big problem that is not addressed on here, the first hurdle in dealing with these tracks is taking them off of the sprue. To take these off the sprue, the success I've had with them is using a clean cut snip, and you apply a little bit of pressure on each of these points that connect the track to the runner. You apply a little pressure, let go, apply a little pressure to the other side, let go, and you repeat that until the link will finally just pop off of the runner. The end connectors and the teeth you also disconnect from the runner fully and ignore the instructions. Over here is where the problem generates from the track. If you follow this over here, you will snap the two center portions. This is because on the tooth there is a molded in snap in which is intended for it to hold the track in shape while you go ahead and install the end connectors. Because of the fragile nature of the plastic, this will snap the link in half prior to the piece actually clicking in. To solve this issue, you take very fine sandpaper and you run it up and down each side of the snap of the tooth. By wearing down the snap, will free up the component and it will fit into the track link a lot easily and will not cause it to break. Also, to free up the tolerances, I like to take an X-Acto knife and remove a little bit of material from either end of the tooth that makes contact with the track. By freeing up the tolerances, it opens the track up to fit together a lot more easily, as well as it will pivot and contour better with the suspension than left more stiff. Finally, as for adding on the end connectors, what I like to do is I like to add a very fine amount of super glue to every other pin that you see here. By gluing the end connector on only these locations, it will keep the piece connected to the track and will prevent the track from falling apart and disassembling on you while you're working on the model. It'll also keep the piece nice and firmly assembled while it is being painted and placed onto the vehicle. If you follow those steps with building the tracks, you can assemble a full set of tracks like I've done here on this M26A1, as well as on my recently finished M50 Sherman. The one disadvantage with the AFV Club tracks is, as you can see, it's very laborious and very tedious and time consuming. The one advantage that the AFV Club track have, though, is that they are a lot more available. They have been around since the early 2000s and are very prolific and can easily be found on a Google search. And compared with the kind of negative portrayal that they have, should make them very easy to find for very low prices. I've seen the tracks retail from $10 to about $20. In comparison, the friulmodel track links, like I mentioned before, are made out of a single casted track link that we have right here. The track link gets assembled by having a supplied brass wire snipped and inserted into the two pre-molded out holes, and that is what hinges the track together. The one advantage about using this system is that it is a lot faster to assemble compared to the more complex and intricate tracks from AFV Club or Bronco. The Friuli tracks also contour very well with the Italeri sprocket like we have here. And like I mentioned before, is a very crucial point when it comes to working on these aftermarket tracks and fitting them to the supplied kit. The friulmodel set gives you more than enough tracks to assemble each side of the tank, but they also supply you, in case you see fit, a set of links that are molded in a curved state. Because of the design of the Patton track and the Persian track, the end connector and the tooth will have a different orientation when the track is wrapped around a round surface like the sprocket or the return roller. This geometry is actually molded into this special set here. When assembling them, you will have to keep very close attention of the orientation of the track that you are working on in order to have these rounded components in their proper locations. However, I'm glad that they did not force you to use this, as I personally like just using the standard track, and with it installed, as you can see, has a very nice articulation to it, and the rounded feature is not very noticeable. These tracks also make a great set for if the vehicle is being in a diorama, with it either the track being knocked out or with it being serviced by the crew. Another advantage about the Friuli tracks is that they give the model a nice heavy weight to it. It has a nice bit of mass, which aids in having the tank sit well on its designated surface, or if you're building a diorama, it will contour very easily to the terrain on the unlevel space. One disadvantage about the Friuli tracks is that of cost. The tracks that you see here cost about $45 to $50, which is something to keep in mind, specifically if you're working on a tight budget. The starter kit in reference was acquired for $10. So the tracks are actually more expensive than the kit itself. Having said that, I love the way the tracks came out, and I strongly recommend them for the vehicle. Another feature that may be construed as a disadvantage is that of ordering the tracks themselves. The tracks are found on vendors on eBay as well as online. However, I strongly recommend purchasing the tracks directly from the manufacturer themselves off their website. By getting the parts through the manufacturer, you are getting the tracks a lot cheaper, as you are not paying for a markup which is found in stores. As for purchasing off the website, it's a little bit different than, say, purchasing off of eBay or even Amazon, in that you need to follow a certain set of instructions in order to register and to place your order. However, placing your order, if you follow their instructions on the website, is not very difficult, and you'll have your tracks in no time. The tracks are manufactured and shipped from Hungary, so there is a little bit of a shipping delay. However, my transaction with them went very smooth. Another disadvantage to keep in mind for these tracks is the material that they are made of. The material is a lead cast alloy, because of which, if you have small children or small pets nearby, you have to make sure that these track links are out of reach and stay out of their hands. Once the tracks are painted and installed to the vehicle like you see here, the risk of lead contamination is a lot less. Also, keep in mind that while working on the tracks, it is a good idea to frequently wash your hands, as well as wipe down the surface area and the tools that are being used, in order to further reduce the risk of any lead contamination. This is also really important in case you are working on your model on a kitchen table, in places where you don't want to have lead transfer to food or any type of object. And that concludes this aftermarket track review for 1/35 scale Shermans and Patton Pershing based vehicles. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook, and don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more smaller scale builds, as well as 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thank you.